I'm Susie Calhoun.
My name is Nancy Mueller.
I'll be speaking to the Three Calhoun Sisters Ranch, and Nancy will be speaking to.
I'll be telling the story of the home ranch, which is our extended family from our grandfather. Maybe I'll start because the home ranch is older. Our grandfather and his brother purchased it in the 20s, and it's in the hills in the town of Livermore, which is about an hour east of San Francisco. So we're in the foothills, and we have inherited it from our parents. And so currently there are 11 cousins involved, some silent, but we'll get into those details.
The Three Calhoun Sisters Ranch we inherited from our parents also. This ranch is smaller and borders the home ranch. And my parents had purchased it in the 50s. And then my father passed away in 2018 and my mother in 2012. So we became owners in 2018 of the Three Calhoun Sisters Ranch, which we renamed. It really didn't have a name to start with, but we decided to rename it. For the Calhoun Ranch, I don't really know much more of the history than the previous owner was a Wurlitzer of the Wurlitzer piano, and they had mining rights because further up the road, further up Mines Road in Livermore were mines. And so I guess they thought possibly there would be mines. And I think another thing that is important to me is that we can see that there were Native Americans on the property also. Nancy, did you want to say anything about
Yeah, a little bit of history. Our grandfather purchased multiple sections over the years, and so sometimes they were named after the family that had been there prior. There was a Frenchman, and so there's just casual names of certain parts of the property. But one historical thing that's really cool about the home ranch is that we have the top of Crane Ridge was a fire lookout, and there were people that lived there, fire marshals that lived there throughout the summer. And so growing up, and I mean, it was for decades, and there's some incredibly funny stories about the people that lived there. And we got to go visit them in the summer. So that was kind of a neat historical point. Unfortunately, it was destroyed and somebody ransacked it, but but cool history. I've lived up here for most of my adult life. I've had the opportunity to live for a number of years on the home ranch. Susie and I both lived in a little teeny cabin over there that was a hetchy line shack that driven up on a truck. But now I live on the Calhoun. I've lived here for about 30 years. And I think kind of what started us taking things more seriously, because we all had jobs, we were all off farm worker, none of us were ranching for a living. And we, as we got closer to success, to being future owners, we really did start to take notice and say, hey, we got a learning curve here, steep learning curve. We got to start researching. And what kind of started us was, I went to for a number of years, I went to the NRCS meetings, the Natural Resource Conservation Service and the Alameda County Resource Conservation District. And we started a conservation plan with a biologist from the RCD and Point Blue. And I think that was the launching point and probably the most important thing we did to get started. I would encourage anybody who's getting property to do a conservation plan because their services are free. They are so incredibly knowledgeable, and you learn more about, I mean, we've tromped through these hills our entire lives. We thought we knew. Our mother taught us all the flowers. I feel like I know nothing in comparison now. And the conservation plan helps you wrap your head around all the resources on your property and really get a lay of the land. And currently we're raising a few head of cattle, doing grass-fed beef. And that's just going for the last few years. We've always leased the property out in the past. So I think the conservation planning and being good stewards and trying to be sustainable and to be able to, Susie and I don't have children, but we'll be passing it on to our nieces. And so I think we're really focusing on leaving it better than we received it if possible.
Sure. I believe what I value most is that it's the open space, the native species that are on the ranch. Also knowing that it was inhabited by Native Americans, and that makes me feel more responsible for taking better care of the property and doing the best I can to have it survive.
And I think we kind of live in I'd say our area is a little conservative compared to some of Northern California's more forward thinking, organic. We're not quite there yet in our region. And I think our mom was kind of a forward thinker in the sense of she was always going to the Native Plant Society shows and to the fungus fairs and the wildflower shows, and she taught us a lot about it. And then both of our grandfathers were outdoorsmen in different respects. One was a farmer, one was a hunter and fisherman. And so we really have gained, and from our father, gained a respect for the outdoors, and really appreciating nature. And so I kind of view our property more like a park than a ranch, because it's just gorgeous. And we like to bring our friends to show them around and just, take hikes and really appreciate the land for its beauty and resources. And then our heritage is really important too, because our family's been here since probably the 1850s. 3 of our great grandfathers came to Livermore. So, from different regions. So really a lot of heritage too.
With the 3 Calhoun Sisters Ranch, we began the process by kind of breaking my parents in early, because they did not even have a living trust to address succession at all. So we first started having my parents work on the living trust, and we thought we were working it through and having, some of the information dealt with. But then when my father died, after my mother died, we did a little more. And then after my father died, we thought it would be just a smooth transition. Well, it really wasn't, as far as the legal documents and what have you. But I think because we had talked about it with each other, my sister and I seemed to work as a unit. We had a common goal, we wanted to keep the property. And so that was okay. But the details hadn't all been worked out, but it went much more smoothly than the other ranch.
This is a little long. Where are we in the transfer process? Just last week, we're working with 2 mediators, and Susie's husband has valiantly stepped up to help us in this transfer, as he's retired and has stepped up to the plate to help us as a representative for our side of the family. And I said last week, man, this is a teeth clencher. We're in like this point that is nerve-wracking. I started researching succession planning. We're trying to remember 12, 13, 14 years ago, when that term even came out, because when I brought it up to the family, nobody knew what it was. But I could see on the wall, the first transfer from our grandmother was the last one living, passed it on to our parents and siblings and a nephew because one sibling had passed away. And that transfer didn't go well. Unfortunately, one uncle chose not to be a member of the LLC, so he was on the outs, and I saw the writing on the wall, and it's like, it's only going to get worse when 9 of us are involved. And so I started attending workshops. I read everything I could get my hands on. California Farm Links was the first workshop I attended, and what was so helpful is that it was the first time I realized we aren't alone. This is actually the norm, having problems passing your property down. And so we're about 5 to 6 years into we're actually trying, now that we've all inherited it, we're trying to divide the ranch into 2 parcels. And so that's kind of where we are now. And it's been really, really rough.
And I will add, there are actually 11 parties involved in this property. And the good thing about having my husband be a part of it is that he doesn't have the emotional ties that we all do. And he's able to look at it in more of a business perspective. I'll start with the Calhoun Ranch. The goals that we had set was, we didn't really have specific goals, but we all knew that we wanted to keep the property and pass it on to the next generation. And I think what has really helped me on both ranches was actually an American Farmland Trust succession planning that Nancy and I participated in with Women for the Land in California. And we were given a worksheet to go through, and it really helped, be outlined line by line. And the same, so that when we started to work with the home ranch, the mediators helped us, gave us a very similar worksheet. And I was happy that I'd really thought it through with the first program to come up with goals, my personal goals. And I would say that not everyone in the family has gone through that process, which makes it very difficult. They really do not want to even look at it, I don't think. They want it to stay the same.
So let me kind of back up. So goals for the home ranch, for me, it started early on. The one thing I started with, it was transferring your farm or ranch to the next generation. That was probably the first thing I ever read from the Montana State University Extension. And they actually had worksheets to think about, goals to work on. So my cousin and I, the first time we got a meeting together, and it was with 3 generations, and nobody could understand why we needed this. It was kind of brutal. And afterwards, people were questioning my motives. It wasn't pretty, to be honest. And the meeting, how they spoke during the meeting, it was very defensive. And we didn't have any help at that point. So I knew at that point we needed outside help. And so the first time we got a consultant who would give us a one-time meeting for free to help us. And again, this was a 2-generation one. And again, it was a couple points, people were in tears. It was not pleasant. And it fell apart. We had one meeting with him and it all collapsed. A few years later, probably 3 to 5 years later, did we meet with, it was quite a few years later, we hired a consultant who I had listened to at a workshop. And at that time I was working with Leah from California Farm Links. They are resources that help you. I mean, she was with us for probably 2 to 3 years, handheld us through a lot of the processes. And so we had another few meetings. We probably met with 2 or 3 times with both sides of the family this time, but again, that collapsed. And I mean, it's really been a struggle. And so now, fortunately, it probably took me 4 to 5 years to convince the family to work with the, okay, so they're called the California Agriculture Mediation Program. And it's a nonprofit organization here in California where they set you up with attorneys. So we have 2 female attorneys acting as mediators, walking us through the division process. And we've gotten further than we ever have. It's an amazing program. And so we're doing pretty good. And all along the way, I forgot we were on goals. Each person did have us work on goals. You know, they set us up with goals, each counselor, each person. And so we always have had goals to work on, you know, working along, dividing if possible, maintaining it in rangeland. And so they've helped us along the way to set goals and try to focus on them, because it's really easy to be sidetracked from your goals, especially with a lot of baggage and history. You get sidetracked. And so to be forward thinking, think about how you're going to get to that goal. That's so important. And I think really it's lifelong. I mean, succession with a family, it never ends. And that's the one thing that they taught us almost every place I attended, is that you want to start the next generation young, and it's lifelong, you know, because everything changes. The county we're in has really strict regulations. Like the zone we're in, you can only build 1 house per 320 acres. So there's not a lot of opportunity for a large family to have too many people live on your property. It's really strict, and the cost of living is so astronomical that it's pretty complicated and difficult to be sustainable. And I think that's kind of where we are on both properties, is how do we sustain this land? Because our father and our grandfather made it look really easy, and it is not. They just kind of sailed along, and man, it's not easy. It's really complicated. Yeah, because our nieces can't afford to live here without assistance. There's no way they could live in our community. A house in a suburb home built in the 60s is $1.2 million. It's horrific. Yeah. And so for them, we're trying to figure out, man, how can we get them to be able to live here so that they can enjoy the property, they can enjoy the ranch? How do we help them to be able to do this?
It's even more complicated on the home ranch with so many people involved.
And our father really did want the girls to inherit the property. And so he really wanted them to have it. So it's like, how can we help them? You know, how can we leave it in their hands in a sustainable manner?
Some of the business and legal tools that we've used would be Farm Links would be one. Let's see, I've used Women for the Land with American Farmland Trust a lot. It happened during COVID, and I was able to participate in a lot of virtual communication or informational meetings, which was helpful. Nancy had mentioned the California Agricultural Mediation Program has been huge. we've hired some outside help. Nancy can address that. I've also used California Women for Agriculture has services or conventions and conferences and meetings that I've gone to, and information from them. Nancy?
Yeah, so for business and legal tools, we have kind of a wide range. We know a number of families in the region that have gone through some similar things. So we do have some mentors that we can go to for help. But then I think all of the living where we do, we have a lot of nonprofit organizations that we can reach out to. And it's funny because our three sisters, we've all kind of been involved in different aspects. Our sister Mary has belonged to the Alameda County Cattle Women for a number of years. So she's involved in that. I've been more involved with the NRCS, and so that more of the conservation side, Susie and California Women for Ag. So we've all reached out to these organizations, and then you're able to find other organizations like even the California Rangeland Coalition has had succession planning workshops. So I've gone to multiple workshops, but then we have with the home ranch, we have talked to a variety of attorneys. Nothing major because we were trying to keep away from any litigation, but for advice, I mean, we've traveled to Sacramento for attorneys, a couple here in town. I mean, we've probably talked to 4 to 5 different agricultural, real estate, tax, because there's so many different avenues that you have to understand. And it's a really steep, it's been a really steep learning curve. Really steep learning curve.
May I address that in Alameda County, the Alameda County Resource Conservation District has a partnership with the NRCS. And so they have been very helpful also, and also have offered different workshops for us to participate in.
And I was also going to a SCORE counselor at our Chamber of Commerce. They have free counseling with SCORE counselors, which are retired community members that give you free advice. And even I was more going to him for grass-fed beef, but he helped me see some different aspects of the transfer. So many resources that we've been helped with. It's been really helpful. I mean, we would have been drowning. It would have been over if we didn't have all these resources. And we're fortunate because we live in an area where there are organizations like this. Yeah, Leah kept my head above water for probably 2 to 3 years. You know, when you're drowning in it, she like kept my head above water. Unbelievable, the assistance.
What I have found supportive of these different organizations is that they all have a little bit to offer, a little bit different information, yet they intertwine. And it's been very helpful because it just opens your eyes to so many different aspects of the transfer.
And I think when attending a variety of workshops, you meet a variety of farmers and ranchers that are going through what you're going through. And so that's really supportive and helps you to know you're not alone. You're not an anomaly. And then another thing, and along the way, people recommend things. And I somehow got a hold of an attorney in the Bay Area. I think it might have been through SCORE. And it was, you know, they give you free advice.
For Money Talk, we started, this would be for the Calhoun Ranch, because the home ranch, we're not there yet, but we should be. The 3 of us got a financial advisor that helped us because we knew we really needed help that we didn't really have, none of us had a banking background. So that helped us decide what to do. And fortunately, we work as a unit, and it was easy for us to come together on that. However, you know, that we all do have different priorities with the money, I would say. And you still just have to talk it out.
Yeah, because it's funny because the three of us come from very different backgrounds and have very different philosophies, maybe, so to speak. And so you've got to listen. You've got to compromise. Yes. Everybody has to compromise at something. But I'd say for us, fortunately, our parents were very frugal and very wise. We wondered why our father was always visiting half a dozen banks, and oh my gosh, just going through all of that was like, oh my goodness. But he left it in a place to where without the money they left us, it would have been very difficult to move forward. So we were very, very fortunate. But on to the home ranch, let's, as far as the home ranch goes, financially speaking, they had created an LLC early on. And so we would get, our parents would get monthly statements. They would get meeting agenda minutes. And we started to get a little concerned when the little cabin we lived in, they wanted to kind of tear it down and spend a lot of money, or at least get a loan to put a new building there. And since we would be inheriting in the future, it kind of raised red flags for us. And so was one of the reasons we stepped in to get involved. But unfortunately, it was pretty tumultuous. There was a lot of yelling and screaming. Fortunately, I usually am the loud one, but I didn't yell and scream at any meetings. But eventually I was asked to not attend anymore, which was really sad and disconcerting for me, that I could no longer attend these meetings with our parents who were in their 80s. And it's like, this is just wrong. You know, what business do you have coming to these meetings? And so I started, and our parents weren't the most organized. So they didn't, okay, here's my binders. This is what I've collected over the last 10 to 12 years, because you have to be organized. So I started collecting meeting agenda minutes. I started collecting the financials so that we knew what the heck is going on. And so it was a pretty steep learning curve trying to gather everything together, understand, you know, how the ranch was being managed. And I come from a background with lots of budgeting, so that kind of came easy to me, crunching the numbers. But it's pretty complex. And now that we're trying to divide, the ranch is 1,600 acres, and we're trying to divide it, and it might not be sustainable divided. And that's what we're coming to find out. We're having to go over numbers, readjusting, trying to figure out how can this smaller portion of the ranch be sustainable. And it's not looking real good, unfortunately. And so the finances are really important. Yeah, in regards to communication, each of the people we worked with always had rules up front of how to conduct a meeting and how you treat each other. And so we've always had like rules of the game, so to speak. And so it's been really helpful. Leah actually gave us up front, you know, here's how we need to run the meeting. Here's how we all have to treat one another. And then once we started working with the agricultural mediation program, they actually, the first thing they did with us, we all had individual communication classes. We had like a couple of 2-hour classes on how to communicate, because over the years, communication has not been pretty. And we're all women on our side of the family. And so it's kind of one guy against 5 angry women. And so, but it's just been, I mean, it's been rough over the years. The levels of communication, email is horrific. We have had horrific email communications, and meeting in person with help has been so beneficial. You get so much further by communicating face to face with assistance. And so they've had really good communication programs all along the way for us.
Yes, I think that was another reason that it was good to have an outsider, being my husband, Troy, step in to help with the process, because it's nice having a male on both sides, on both teams.
I think for me, going into a meeting, I like to be really prepared. I worked at a winery, and fortunately my boss was very process oriented, and I came out with skills, meeting skills, process skills that I've been able to apply. And because we would have 8-hour meetings, and so I'm used to sitting through meetings, but having very direct, very thought out, planned out, step-by-step processes. And so that really helped me to, when I go in, I've got my paperwork in order. And I've always tried to base my side on facts and research. I mean, I have spent thousands of hours in research on this. I kind of have been the main driver. And I'm one of the youngest, so it's kind of funny because I'm the obnoxious little cousin, but I'm the one that's been the main driver. And so being prepared, I mean, you need facts, and doing your due diligence, I think it makes you feel better because you've got a clean conscience at night. You know you've done all that you can do. And that you've done what you can to research everything out. You come in with your agenda. So we do try to always have an agenda, and important to get it out in advance. And so it is, I try to stay process driven so that, I'm a little scattered in general, but sometimes very focused.
I agree that the process is really important, and you tend to get frustrated that it's not moving, or dealing with all these emotions, but realizing that it's part of the process that you didn't deal with as a child or within the family earlier. Now it's time to start dealing. It's just part of the process. You just take it one step at a time.
So my advice is to start young, start early. The kids are never too young to make an impact on them, so that they're thinking about their relationship to the ranch in the future. How I wish in hindsight that we would have, because we were in 4-H, we were in FFA, we spent hundreds of hours with our grandfather. But if I had only listened harder, if I would have been more involved, that you want the kids to be involved as early as you can get them, and pass it on so the learning curve isn't like this when they get involved. And communicate, research, find mentors anywhere you can to help you through the process.
My advice for the process would be to know what your own goals are. And as Nancy referenced, reach out for those different resources and keep an open line of communication, be a good listener, be able to talk to others.